The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Sarah first noticed the stranger watching their cabin from the tree line. She stood at the kitchen window, cradling baby Emma against her shoulder, watching the heavy drops cascade from the roof like a silver curtain. The storm had turned their usually peaceful homestead into an island surrounded by muddy streams and pooling water. "Jacob," she called softly to her husband, who sat at the wooden table cleaning his rifle. "There's someone out there." Jacob looked up from his work, his weathered hands pausing on the gun barrel. At 35, he had the steady presence of a man who had learned to read danger in the wilderness. He rose slowly, moving to stand beside his wife at the window through the rain. They could make out a figure on horseback beneath the pine trees. The rider sat motionless, as if he had all the time in the world. Even from a distance, something about his stillness felt deliberate, patient. Papa, their 8-year-old daughter Lily, looked up from where she sat on the floor, playing with her corn-husk doll. "Who is that man?" Jacob's jaw tightened slightly. "I don't know, sweetheart, but don't you worry about it." The truth was, Jacob did worry. In these remote mountains of Colorado Territory, unexpected visitors usually meant trouble. He had moved his family here 5 years ago, seeking the peace that came with distance from civilization. But distance could also mean vulnerability. As the afternoon wore on, the stranger remained at his post. Sarah tried to focus on her daily tasks, but her eyes kept drifting to the window. She baked bread, the warm scent filling their one-room cabin. She nursed Emma and helped Lily with her letters, but always, that figure remained in the corner of her vision. When evening came, Jacob made a decision. "I'm going to talk to him, Jacob." "No." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "Not in this storm, not in the dark. A man doesn't sit in the rain for hours without a reason. Sarah, if he wanted to harm us, he would have made his move by now." Jacob pulled on his heavy coat and hat, checking his sidearm before stepping onto the covered porch. The rain drummed against the wooden roof overhead, and he could see his breath in the cool air. "You're welcome to come closer," he called out across the muddy yard. No sense sitting out there in the weather. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the rider slowly urged his horse forward, moving with deliberate care across the waterlogged ground. As he drew nearer, Jacob could see he was younger than expected, maybe 25, with dark hair plastered to his head by the rain. The stranger stopped at the edge of the porch but didn't dismount. "Name's Thomas," he said simply. His voice carried a slight accent, maybe from back east. "Thomas Mitchell, Jacob Hartwell. This is my land." Thomas nodded slowly. "I know. I've been watching your family." The words sent a chill down Jacob's spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain. His hand moved instinctively toward his gun. "Easy," Thomas said, raising one hand. "I'm not here to harm anyone. I'm here to warn you." "Warn us about what?" Thomas looked toward the cabin, where warm lamplight glowed through the windows. "There's men coming. 3 of them. They've been tracking me for near 2 weeks now." "What do they want with you?" "What they think I took from them." Thomas's voice was steady, but Jacob caught something underneath it. Fear, maybe, or resignation. "They're wrong, but that won't stop them from coming." Jacob studied the young man's face in the dim light from the cabin windows. There was something honest about him, something that spoke against Jacob's initial suspicions. "How do you know they're coming here?" "Because I led them here." Thomas's admission hung in the air between them. "I figured if I was going to make a stand, better to do it somewhere with good folks who might need warning." The rain continued its steady rhythm as Jacob processed this information. Inside the cabin, he could hear Sarah humming softly to baby Emma, and Lily practicing her letters. Aloud, "You could have kept riding," Jacob said finally. "Yes, sir, I could have. Why didn't you?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hands on the reins. "My PA always said a man's character shows in what he does when no one's watching, but I think it shows even more in what he does when folks are watching, and they're counting on him to do right." Jacob felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the conversation he had expected to have with a stranger in the rain. "These men," Jacob said. "How many days behind you?" "They'll be here tomorrow, I'd guess." "Storms slowed them down, same as it did me." Jacob looked back toward the cabin where his whole world lived and breathed and depended on him. Then he looked at Thomas, sitting straight in his saddle despite the rain running down his face. "You better come inside," Jacob said. "Get warm and dry. We'll figure this out together." Thomas shook his head. "Can't ask you to get involved in my troubles." "You're not asking," Jacob replied. "I'm offering." For the first time, Thomas smiled slightly. "Your wife's not going to like having a stranger in her house." "My wife," Jacob said, "has the biggest heart in Colorado Territory. She'll have you fed and dry before you can say grace." True to Jacob's words, Sarah welcomed Thomas with quiet kindness. She heated water for him to wash, gave him dry clothes that had belonged to Jacob's brother, and set a plate of hot food before him without asking a single question about why he was there. As Thomas ate, Jacob told Sarah about the men who were coming. Her face grew serious, but she didn't panic. Instead, she looked at their guest with new understanding. "You did right by warning us," she said simply. That night, as the rain continued its endless drumming on the roof, they made their plans. Thomas would leave before dawn, drawing the men away from the cabin. Jacob would be ready with his rifle, just in case. But when morning came, the storm had changed everything. The creek that ran beside their property had become a raging river, cutting them off from the main trail. No one would be going anywhere for at least another day. "Looks like we're all in this together now," Jacob said, standing on the porch and watching the swollen waters race past. Thomas nodded, checking his pistol. "Then we better make the best of it." As the day wore on, they worked side by side, strengthening the cabin's defenses and preparing for whatever might come. But something unexpected happened in those quiet hours. They talked. Thomas told them about his family back in Pennsylvania, about the job he'd taken to help his sick mother, about how everything had gone wrong through no fault of his own. In return, Jacob shared stories of building their life in the wilderness, of the challenges and rewards of raising children so far from civilization. Sarah talked about her garden, her hopes for Lily's education, her dreams of seeing Emma grow up strong and free. By afternoon, Thomas was no longer a stranger. He was helping Lily with her arithmetic, bouncing baby Emma on his knee while Sarah prepared supper, and splitting wood alongside Jacob despite the continuing rain. When the three riders finally appeared on the far side of the swollen creek the next morning, they found something they hadn't expected. Instead of one man alone and vulnerable, they saw a united front. Jacob and Thomas stood together on the porch, rifles ready, while Sarah watched from the window with steely determination. The lead rider called across the water, his words barely audible over the rushing creek. "Send out the thief, and we'll leave you be." Jacob stepped forward. "The only thieves I see are the ones trying to take something that doesn't belong to them." There was a long standoff, the two groups separated by the treacherous water. Finally, perhaps recognizing that they were outmatched and outpositioned, the three riders turned and rode away. That evening, as the storm finally began to clear and the first stars appeared between breaking clouds, Thomas prepared to leave, but Jacob had a different idea. "Stay," he said simply. "We could use another hand here, and you could use a fresh start." Thomas looked around the cabin at the family that had welcomed him, protected him, and treated him like kin. He looked at little Lily, who had already extracted a promise that he would teach her to whittle. He looked at Sarah, who was humming while she rocked baby Emma to sleep. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. And so the longest storm in memory ended, not with destruction, but with the forging of bonds stronger than blood. As the rain finally stopped and morning light filtered through clearing skies, the Hartwell family had grown by one, and Thomas Mitchell had found something he'd been searching for without knowing it, a home.